Hey guys, it's Luke Dion, and today I am going to be talking about the books that I read in May. So I read, I think, 12 books in May, and I also participated in the Asian Readathon this month, so all of the books that I read were either by Asian authors or featured Asian characters, so yeah, let's just get into the books that I read. The first book that I read was actually a reread, and that was Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. This is a time travel book that follows two main characters, Etta and Nicholas, and Etta lives in the 21st century in present day, and she accidentally ends up traveling through time and finding out that she is part of one of these time-traveling families who has a lot of power in this kind of alternate world, and she ends up in 1776 on a boat that is sailing across the Atlantic, and she meets a boy named Nicholas, and together they are enlisted to find this object called the astrolabe, which will kind of change time forever, and if she finds it and delivers it to Cyrus Ironwood, she will be able to get her mom back, and everything will be great, basically. So, I originally gave this book 4 stars when I read it the first time, but I bumped my rating up to 5 stars because I just really loved this book. I loved all the settings, and Etta and Nicholas are just really great characters. I love their romance. I love Alexandra Bracken's writing. I know it's very contentious, but I really, really love her writing and the way that she describes all the different places in this book. So the reason I read it for the Asian Readathon is because it's set in a bunch of different places, but it's set in Cambodia for a little bit, set in Syria for a little while, and one other place that I cannot remember that's like in Asia. But yeah, so I really, really love this book, and I would definitely recommend it. I love time travel. It's one of like my favorite tropes. So if you're looking for a good time travel book, this is definitely one for you. And Alexandra Bracken was actually a history major in college, so there's a lot of history in this book, and it's just a really fun ride. And I can't wait to reread the second book probably this month. Next, I read Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, Starry River of the Sky, and When the Sea Turns Silver by Grace Lin. These are 3 middle grade books that are kind of like companions. They're not like actually part of a series, but they all follow different characters that go on these journeys, and there are like stories embedded within the books, and yeah, they all kind of follow different main characters. So the first book, Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, follows a girl named Minley who ends up going on this adventure because she believes that she will find this like mythical guy who will end up giving her a wish, and she wishes for her family to be like of good fortune, and she kind of goes on this adventure. She meets like all these different people that end up telling her different stories. I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it like 3 stars. I thought it was a little bit boring. I don't know how like a middle grade reader would actually like maintain their attention, how this book would maintain their attention, because I was even getting bored and like sidetracked while reading this book, and I'm like 17. So I don't know how like an 8-year-old would do with this book, but I still enjoyed it. I still liked some of the stories, even though they were kind of a little bit cut and dry. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. I did not enjoy Starry River of the Sky as much. This one was just a little bit more boring. There wasn't much of an adventure. We basically follow a boy named Randy who ends up going to this village where the moon has disappeared, and so he's kind of trying to figure out the mystery behind that, and he's meeting all these different people again. This one was just very boring. He was kind of just in this village for 90% of the time, and I thought the stories in this book were a little bit better, but still not amazing, so I gave this one 3 stars. I actually gave the first book 3.5 stars, and I gave this one 3 stars. And then I gave the final book, When the Sea Turned to Silver, I gave this one 4 stars. This book follows a girl named Pinmay who her grandmother ends up disappearing, and then she teams up with this boy to go find her and kind of go on this adventure. And this one was definitely my favorite one. It's the longest one. I think it's like over 100 pages longer than both of those previous books. And there was just a lot more in this book. I thought the characters were way more engaging, and I liked that we got to see perspectives from the grandmother, and I thought the stories in this book were way more well done, so I enjoyed it immensely. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this series like as a whole, even if it's not like amazing. I think this would be really fun to like read to your kid, but I think that for like an actual middle grade reader reading them on their own, they probably would not be very intrigued most of the time. Next, I read The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman. This book follows 4 main characters. Let's see if I can remember all their names. We have Vera, Ria, Caleb, and I'm forgetting the fourth sibling's name. Ronak, yes, okay. So basically, they're a family, and their dad loved puzzles and all these riddles and stuff, and it's a fantasy book. It's set in, like, an Indian-inspired setting. So we have them, and they're kind of like royals, and there's, like, all this drama, and basically they find out that there is this mythical object called the Ivory Key, which can kind of restore magic back to the land, and they set out on a quest to find it. I thought I would love this book because I love sibling dynamics, I love quests, I love, like, Indian-inspired settings, but this book was not it. I did like it. I gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I was expecting this book to be about a quest, and for the first 200 pages of this book, really, we didn't get the quest. We only got the quest in the last, like, third, I would say. The first 2/3 were really just, like, setup and just kind of conversations between the characters, and while stuff was happening, I just didn't find myself too engaged, so I kind of had to force myself to read this book. Once we got past that, I read the book in like I read the rest of the book in like a single sitting. So I am intrigued to read the second book because I think that I would enjoy it a lot more than this first one, because I feel like that one will be a lot more high action and it's the conclusion to the duology. So I think I would enjoy it a lot more, but this book, while I liked the characters and I liked the setup for the most part, I just did not get, like, the promise of the premise, if that makes any sense. So that's why I didn't enjoy it as much, but I still think it's a solid debut fantasy, and I will definitely read more from this author in the future. Then I reread a series of, like, one of my favorite series, and that is the Warcross duology by Marie Lu. So we have Warcross and Wildcard, and these books, well, Warcross especially, follows a girl named Amika Chen, who is down on her luck. She's about to be evicted, and one day she ends up accidentally hacking herself into the Warcross Championships. Warcross is this game that was created by this 21-year-old billionaire that has taken the world by storm. It's like virtual reality. One day she ends up hacking into the championship games, and instead of being sent to prison like she thinks she'll be, she actually ends up getting a call from the creator named Hideo Tanaka, and he is inviting her to come to Japan, in Tokyo, not just to be a part of the championship games, but to also be a bounty hunter for him and find this person who is infiltrating the Warcross system. So this book follows Amika as she is joining, like, this team for the Warcross games, and also trying to track down this character named Zero, who is messing with Warcross from the inside. And its sequel, Wildcard, picks up where that book left off, and this book is kind of dealing with the dark side of Warcross. So yeah, they're very different books, but I really enjoyed this series overall. Again, I originally, like Passenger, gave Warcross 4 stars when I first read it. I actually reread it and gave it 4 stars the second time, but this third time I gave it a full 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Wildcard, I still gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. While I enjoyed it a little bit more the second time around, I just didn't really love it as much. I think a lot of the stuff that I loved in Warcross, like the actual Warcross games and the dynamics between the characters and just all the fun stuff, was missing from Wildcard. This book was definitely just a lot darker and slower, and we were really just following Amika as she was kind of making different revelations, and while those things were interesting and they added to the story as a whole, I just didn't really like it as much. So yeah, overall this is a really solid series, but I definitely liked the first book more. Then we have a very disappointing one, which is An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. Emily X.R. Pan is the author of The Astonishing Color of After, which is one of my favorite contemporary books of all time. And this is her sophomore novel. It's been like 4 years since her first book, and I was really hoping to love this one. It is a Romeo and Juliet retelling with a little bit of Chinese mythology, and I thought I would love it, but I was just so bored while reading this book. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. I just felt like most of the story was just aimless meandering, and I just felt like there was nothing to the story. There were interesting characters at points, and there were interesting plot points sometimes, but as a whole, like, this book did not need to be nearly 400 pages, and I just felt myself so bored during this, like, reading experience, and I had to force myself to actually read the book. So yeah, I was just not the biggest fan of it. I still like Emily X.R. Pan's writing, and I will still read, like, her books when she comes out with them in the future, but I don't know, this one was just a big letdown. I feel like the characters were very, like, in the beginning they were intriguing, but it just felt very, like, they had no development. Like, even by the end, it was just like, what's the point here? And I think the Romeo and Juliet thing is just so tired. Like, I'm so done with Romeo and Juliet retellings. I feel like it's really hard to pull off a good retelling because it's just, like, so obvious what's going to happen at the end, and this was exactly, like, the ending was exactly what I predicted. Even though the ending was interesting, it was just, like, so cut and dry. Like, I feel like it was just very expected. So, yeah, not the biggest fan of this one, and I'm really sad about it. I think that this had, like, some potential, but I don't know, I think I was probably just, I really wasn't that interested in it when I read the synopsis, and I wish I had listened to my instincts, because I didn't love it as much as I hoped to. On a completely separate note, the next book that I read is one of my new favorite books of the year, and that is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This is an adult literary novel that follows a girl named Roya, and it kind of is in two timelines. So we start actually in 2013, and you don't really know what she's doing. She's like an old woman now, she's living in America, and then we go back in time to 1953, I think it is, or 1952, and she is living in Tehran during the, like, revolution. There's a lot of political upheaval, and she ends up meeting a boy named Bahman, and they end up falling in love, and one day something happens and they, like, don't speak for a really long time, and then in present day she ends up meeting him again, and she kind of gets to figure out what happened. I don't want to say too much because I think even the synopsis spoils way too much about this book. I was like halfway through the book and I read the synopsis, and some stuff in the synopsis hadn't even happened yet, so I would definitely say just know what I told you going in. And yeah, I really, really liked this book. I actually loved it. I loved Marjan Kamali's writing. I thought it was just so lyrical, and this book was honestly just beautiful. I cried. This is the first book that I cried about this year. I loved the characters. Roya and Bahman were so well developed, and I even loved Roya's family and even Bahman's family, and I loved the progression of the story. I loved how the author kind of, like, followed the timeline, and it was just captivating. I loved the story. I read it so quickly, and I was mad when I finished it because I just wanted more. I will definitely be rereading this book in the future, and it will definitely be showing up on my favorite books of the year list. After that, I read You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. This is a YA contemporary book that follows a girl named Julie whose boyfriend Sam has recently just died, and she's kind of going through the grieving process, and one day she just calls him out of the blue just to kind of have some closure, and he actually ends up picking up. So this book kind of goes through their conversations and Julie's grief. Really not a lot happens in this book, so I don't want to give away too much, but I really did think this book was, like, very emotional. I would definitely say don't read this book if you're not in a good place, but I think that this is a really, really strong portrayal of grief. I think that you're really just with Julie the whole time. You're going through all of her, like, ups and downs. You're just moving with her through the story, and I really, really loved that. I thought that the way Dustin Tao portrayed her character and portrayed grief was really great, and I loved the flashbacks that we got in this book to before tragedy, like, struck the relationship or whatever. And I just thought it was really well done. It's really short, and there's not a lot of plot, but it was great, and I absolutely loved the ending. So, yeah, if you're looking for, like, a good sad contemporary, I would definitely recommend picking this up, and I give it 4 stars. After those intense kind of literary novels, I ended up picking up Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan. I hate the title of this book with such a burning passion, but, this is obviously the author that wrote Crazy Rich Asians, and I really love the Crazy Rich Asians books. I know they're kind of contentious, but I really enjoyed them. And this book is actually kind of a retelling of A Room with a View, and it follows a girl named Lucy who ends up going with her cousin Charlotte to Capri for a wedding, and while there she ends up meeting a boy named George, and they end up switching rooms. It's kind of like A Room with a View, and there's all this drama that happens in Capri, and then 5 years later they meet each other again in East Hampton, and yeah, it's kind of just a lot of drama. If you liked the drama in Crazy Rich Asians, you'll definitely like the drama in here. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It's a great palate cleanser. I know a lot of people didn't like this book, but I kind of went in knowing what the book was going to be, and I think that helped me enjoy it a lot more. I really liked the characters, I really liked the setting. I thought both like Italy and East Hampton, especially since I've been to East Hampton more times than I can count and I used to have a house there. I know it really well, and it was just really, really fun to read about. And yeah, if you just want to read about rich people problems and extravagant lives, definitely pick up this book. And I really enjoyed it, and as I said, I give it 4 stars. And I will definitely be picking up the sequels whenever they come out. And then the final book that I read in May was Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This is a literary novel that follows a girl named Sunja, and this book is really hard to explain. It is kind of a generational novel. It follows her growing up, and then it follows her kids, and then her kids' kids, and then kind of so on and so forth. I loved this book for the first half. The second half brought it down so much for me. I was probably going to end up giving this book like a 4.5 at like the, I don't know, 220 something page mark. Past that, however, I was just not into it. It kind of, the first half spent so much time building up Sunja and her family, like her immediate family, and then the second half, it was just like, years would pass between the chapters. Like, one chapter would be 1972, and then the next chapter would be 1975, and it was kind of just, I felt like I was missing chapters, and I couldn't connect with the characters as easily, and I just felt like Sunja was kind of thrown to the wayside. I did really like Min-Jin Lee's writing, although there were randomly, like, some scenes that were just so gratuitous in, like, sexual ways. I was like, I'm not into this. And there were just, like, random scenes that, like, kind of made me raise an eyebrow. But overall, I did like the writing of this book, and I did like the plot. I just wish it had been executed a little bit better. Especially since by the second half, I was just like, what is going on here? It felt very aimless. It felt like the author was kind of just writing very intuitively and not actually because it was suiting the story in the right way. So this book took me a little while to get through. I think it took me like 3 or 4 days, just because it was very dense. And by like the second half, I was kind of just like, what's going on? But I know a lot of people really love this book. I know a lot of people say it's like a great literary novel, and I've personally read better, so I can't really corroborate that, but I think that it was solid for the most part. Honestly, I think that this book could have had the first half be the same, and then cut like half or 3/4 of the second half. And I probably would have given this book like 4.5 or 5 stars. So that was really just my main issue, and that's what's keeping me from fully embracing this book. But I know a lot of people love it. I know that it made a lot of people cry, and I am excited to watch the Hulu show. Or HBO Max. I actually don't know what it's on. But I thought it was fine. Not my favorite. I ended up giving it like 3 out of 5 stars. So yeah. I definitely wish I had liked it a little bit more though. So that is it for my May wrap up. I feel like I was talking at the speed of light there, so yeah, that is it. I'd love to know what books you guys read in May. If you have also read any of the books that I read this month, I'd love to know your thoughts. But that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All my social media links are in the description box below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!